the full drum kit on Life Is, we were basically just trying to go for, a pretty familiar, sort of like 1960s pop sort of structure.
Life is, it's not what you think it's for, and I can seem to say no.
On previous records, I've tended to try to do everything by myself, or at least write everything, and this time there was a little bit of a sort of giving direction and seeing what the players could come up with. On the plus side, there are certainly people that are more capable than me at writing certain things, and if you are trying to achieve a certain sound, it makes sense to call on very talented people whose skills exceed your own. So in that sense, it was very exciting, sort of like being like a puppet master or something. But then, there is sort of like you are giving up some control. But I think it's mostly positive. It was both intentional and also just sort of the natural course of things. There was quite a few years in between, I guess. And also it was my second time making a record in the studio, so you sort of, maybe in between the first run and the second run in the studio, you sort of understand the resources you have at your disposal a bit more, and are able to sort of imagine some of the extra color that you can give things. And for whatever reason, I think I just wrote songs that felt like they were a more appropriate canvas for some of these touches, like percussion, which is something I've never done before. I think that there can be a real danger with people who have sort of originated as solo artists sort of graduating into this full band incarnation. I think sometimes it can result in a watered down sound, or sort of like a homogeneous sound if you aren't careful, because maybe some of those more idiosyncratic qualities of the music can get stamped out by everyone needing to sort of unify behind like one beat or one structure. So you have to be very careful. I guess we're trying to sort of think of it more as like a jazz approach or something, where it's sort of the core essence of the music stands, but there are these sort of touches coming in to accent things, and things come in and out. It isn't so traditional, I guess. I always say LA is like a 5-year adjustment period. I think it takes a really long time. I don't think it's a city that welcomes you necessarily. I think a lot of people can't tough it out, and I don't blame them. You really have to like carve your own path and establish roots in this very dogged way. Coming of age, I read a lot of music books and bios and stuff, and I'd say like 90% of that touches on LA in some shape or form. So it's always held a certain level of mystique for me. I think if you play an acoustic guitar and you're not doing something like radically specific stylistically that would counter a folk association, then it's just sort of something that people turn to, and I have no problem with that. I think, my last record is arguably a folk record, even if there are sort of other influences happening, and it isn't, totally descriptive. I would have to imagine that this new record might hit people a little differently, even if the root of it is still an acoustic guitar. I also think over the last few years I've sort of shifted away from fingerpicking, which is also something that is very associated with folk music. So I'll be curious what people think. I guess you could call it a very loose and abstract storyboarding, but it's not very concrete. It's really just stuff that's floating around in your head. You sort of like catch an idea. You might have like notions about something that you might like to try. But I've found if I try to be too specific in the writing process before anything has really started to gel, it doesn't seem to go well. It's kind of like forcing a shape onto this material that doesn't exist yet. So it's sort of like a divination process. I've watched some interviews with David Lynch where he sort of says a similar thing about how he has sort of followed the creative thread of stories where it sort of like begins as this dreamlike thing and you're just sort of taking one step at a time in a direction that feels correct and sort of like trying these things out, and maybe they work, maybe they don't, and it feels like you're trying to piece together something that already exists somewhere else and you're just trying to remember what it is, sort of. It's very regimented, actually. I wake up and do like a little routine, have some coffee, and then I just get started straight away. I usually spend 2 hours writing, which is, singing and playing guitar. It doesn't seem like long, but I find that after 2.5 hours, I can't really give much more, or if I try, I just don't really get any results. So I just try to set aside that time for long stretches.
So the lyrics and the music are kind of written in tandem with each other. It's not like one first and then the other.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say it's melody first. It's more of the shape of the song, and I start with the chords, I play guitar, I'm sort of moving around until a vocal starts to sort of materialize. And a lot of the time that'll just be sort of phonetic shapes, sometimes full lyrics, but those kind of get fully colored in later.